Hello and welcome back to the channel and welcome to 2025. I hope you're all ready for the quarter quell. Apologies in advance. I have a nasty cold at the moment, so my voice is a little off, but 2024 has gone and passed and I wanted to do a tier ranking of all the books I read last year before the conversation becomes obsolete. So this is that. Let's get started. All right, so let me explain the tiers quickly. So at the bottom we have should have DNF'd. I really have a problem when it comes to reading books. I don't DNF as much as I should. That's a goal for 2025 is if I'm like 20% of the way through a book and I'm like, this is just not for me, I just need to let it go. We have I will never get that time back. I read a lot of bad books last year, books that seemed promising at the time, but just did not live up to the standard. Then we have you were good, I'm waiting for you to be great. Similarly, this is a category for books that the premise was very exciting. I enjoyed these ones a bit more than the last tier, but they were just missing that extra something. And then you were a wonderful experience. These books I loved. I thought they were great. They're not gonna stick with me forever, but I enjoyed reading them. And then we have I love you most ardently. These would be the equivalent of my 5-star reads. Just absolute chef's kiss, phenomenal books. I think about them daily. Top tier, it'll pass, no it won't. These are my 6-star reads. These are just like the cream of the crop. If I could forget these books just so I could read them again, I would. Yeah, so these kind of correspond to the 1 through 5 stars, except I like this better because it's more on vibes and less on a numerical scale. Anyway, let's get started. These are all organized in roughly the order I read them last year, so starting in January, ending in December. I read 46 books. I believe all 46 are here. Okay, starting off really strong. A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. See, I love this book. I'm pretty sure I gave it 5 stars, but I do think about it often. I mean, it's everything I want in a book. It's got, you know, folklore, a mix between dark academia and fairy tale, really immersive setting. Yeah, it'll pass and it won't. I'm so excited for the sequel. What is it? I think A Study in Dreaming. I just love the characters. I love the setting. I love Ava Reed. She's just a phenomenal author. I think this is the first book I read by her. So yeah, we started off January very strong. And then we have Macbeth, which I read because my sister was reading it for her English class and needed some help, so I just read along with her. I love you most ardently. Like, that's a beautiful play. It's probably one of my favorite Shakespeare plays. It can do no wrong. I'm reading Lady Macbeth by Ava Reed right now, so again, off to a great start. Continuing on this streak, I read a lot of great books at the beginning of last year. The Serpent of Wings and Night, I think it's called. This is like kind of a weird vampire fantasy, so less gothic vampires existing in our world and more of like a fantasy element to it. It was a really unique storytelling, kind of had a Hunger Games vibe. Loved the twist at the end, loved the characters. See, putting it here next to Macbeth doesn't feel right, but it was more than a wonderful experience. I love you most ardently. It was really good. It was unique. I liked the characters. I enjoyed reading it. Next, Fleabag the Scriptures. I feel like it has to go up here. I love Fleabag the series clearly, and reading the text was also an amazing experience just because you got to see a little more insight into the direction and the interior minds of the characters. So yeah, it's gonna go up there. Next, another banger, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I feel like 2024 was my year of catching up on really popular books from years past that I just didn't have time to read. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo being one of them. This book is amazing. I don't know if Taylor Jenkins Reid is my favorite author, but I love this story. It's not my usual genre either. Like, I don't know, what would you call this? Just like contemporary fiction? I don't know, it feels Like, it's not what I usually gravitate towards, but I did really love it. Next is, I think this is called The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. It's the sequel to Serpent Wings and Night. It's a duology. I'm gonna put Your Wonderful Experience. To be completely honest, like, there was a big enemies to lovers romantic buildup in the first book that kind of feels like it just resets in the second book. I don't know if that's a spoiler, sorry in advance. But yeah, it's just not really the vibe. I don't know. It was fun. It was fun. It was just not as memorable as the first. Oh my god. Okay, next. Ride by Ali Hazelwood. I'm not an Ali Hazelwood hater. I do enjoy her works. As you'll see, there are like 2 other Ali Hazelwood books in here. This was not for me. I'm just gonna put it there. It was her step into fantasy, but it was still so clearly Ali Hazelwood, and that the supernatural was made science, and the fact that the different creatures had like different colors of blood, I was like, this makes no sense. Like, I get we're trying to distinguish between the species, but like, they're all like warm-blooded mammals. Like, they would all have red blood, right? I don't know. That's a really stupid thing that stuck with me, but it was just not good. I didn't even mind. There's Omegaverse in it. Let's just say that. The story was just not good. It was also kind of confusing. Like, it was a thriller or mystery, but like, it was kind of really obvious, and just, it was like half-baked. Next, we have The Wolf and the Woodsman, another Ava Reid. I listened to this one on audiobook, and I kind of regret that because I feel like I kind of lost some of the plot. Like, I just kind of zoned out at bits. So I do want to reread this year, like in a physical copy. I mean, it was amazing. I love all of her characters, and just, she's just one of my favorite writers. Next, this is so disappointing. I'm honestly gonna put this one down here. Should have DNF'd. The premise of this book is amazing. I think it takes place in an alternate reality. Like, there's, or maybe it's just more like folklore, but this woman, she's kind of shunned from the community. I can't even remember why. And she forms this relationship with this woman who I think she discovers injured. She's like a siren or a mermaid. Oh my god, it's just so bad. The only aspect of it that was good was the body horror, but the plot was so convoluted and confusing and slow. The characters were not likable or enjoyable. The relationship never really developed. It just, the premise was so good, and it was just not executed well at all. Like, how do you mess up sapphic mermaids? I don't know, but this one clearly did. Next, we have The Deep by River Solomon. Okay, this has to go up here. It'll pass. No, it won't. This is a fantasy about mermaids. Again, 2024 was the year of the mermaid for me. I read an unbelievable amount of mermaid books, various different kinds and different genres, but this I would classify as literary fiction, kind of fantasy sci-fi. This follows a mer people who are the descendants of slaves who were thrown overboard on the transatlantic slave trade, who were pregnant, and when they gave birth to these like kind of mer people. It deals so much with collective trauma and memory, and community. The main character is essentially like the memory keeper. I don't remember what she's called exactly, but she stores all of the tragedy and horrors that have happened to their people so that everyone else can live normal lives. And then like once every so many years, they have like a group ceremony where everyone experiences that again, and she gets to take that burden off of her shoulders. And she runs away during this because she never wanted this role. She never wanted to be this person. And yeah, it's just so beautiful. It's so just tragic. And if you like historical fiction, if you like fantasy, if you like literary fiction, you'll love this. It's just so powerful. I think about it often. Next is Powerless. I'm a Powerless hater. I feel bad, but at the same time I don't. it's not good. I was around when Powerless was just a little story that Lauren was writing in her bedroom. I've seen it since the beginning, and I just think it's a book that shouldn't have been published. I think she wrote it for herself. You know, she wrote the tropes that she loves and the stories that she loves, but it was clearly never written with the intention of being published, because it does just, quite frankly, rip off the Red Queen and the Hunger Games, like, so blatantly. I will not be reading the rest of the series. I think the main characters are really bland. I think their banter is boring. I just think that she just got a big following and a lot of people really wanted to read it, so she published it, but I don't think she wrote it with the intention of publishing it. That's all I have to say. Next, Luster. Oh, this is a beautiful book. I think I would say You Are a Wonderful Experience. I love this book. It is literary fiction. It follows a young Black woman who starts this affair with a wealthy white man who's married, and they have like an open relationship, but she moves in with them and they have a Black daughter. It's messy. It's messy. She is messy, and I love that. I love messy women. I love weird girls. I kind of wish this focused a little less on her relationship with the father of this family and more on her relationships with the wife and with their Black daughter, because anytime our main character was interacting with their Black daughter, I was enthralled. I loved their dynamics and their complicated relationships. And I really love the complexity between our main character and the wife. That was always super intense to read about. Sometimes the writing just felt kind of slow, but still loved it. The Stolen Heir by Holly Black. I love Holly Black. I love The Cruel Prince. If you're not aware, that whole Folk of the Air series is what got me back into reading during the pandemic. It's probably the best YA series I've ever read, ever. I think about this often just because it's so well done. But I think I'm gonna put it on I Love You Most Ardently. I think that makes sense. Because I don't know if I love it as much as The Cruel Prince, but I do love it a lot. I'm excited to read the sequel. Next, another Ali Hazelwood, Love Theoretically. This I enjoyed. I liked this one. I liked the asexual spectrum representation. I love a good science-y workplace romance vibe. It was really cute. It didn't stick with me as much as the other one on this listed, so You Were a Wonderful Experience. Okay. A Touch of Malice. I read A Touch of Darkness in 2020, and the next book too. And at the time, I was satisfied with that. And I read A Touch of Malice as well when it came out, but A Touch of Chaos, the final book in the series, just came out last year, I think. So I was like, oh, well, I'll finish the series out, but I don't really remember what's happening, so I'm gonna reread the last book. A Touch of Malice is okay. It's nothing great. Like, I don't expect it to be great. I don't have high standards for it. That being said, I am gonna put it in You Are Good, Waiting for You to Be Great, just because it definitely wasn't a wonderful experience, but it also wasn't I'll never get that time back. I'm just gonna skip to A Touch of Chaos right now. Quite possibly one of the worst books I've read last year. It was so bad. It made no sense. The characters were just boring, and it just felt like the last 3 books all over again. It was so repetitive. It just made no sense. I've honestly tried to erase most of it from my mind, so I don't even remember the specifics of what I didn't like about it, but I just know I should have DNF'd it. I should not have read, and I think it was like probably like 400 pages too. Not doing that to myself in 2025. Okay, A Library of Shadows. I'm gonna put this at, oh, but it's so much better than A Touch of Malice. I'm gonna put it there. I don't read a ton of YA anymore. I just kind of feel like I've grown out of it, which if you like YA and you're in your mid-20s or 30s or 40s, like that's so valid. Like I love that for you. I'm just looking for something different at this point in my life. But I was intrigued by the paranormal romance aspect of this, and I do love an academic setting. This is a girl who goes to a private school and is trying to uncover the mystery of what happened to her father, who also was a student there. And she meets this boy who happens to be a ghost. I was just kind of wanting more romance, maybe. The stakes didn't seem super high. Overall, the pacing was just a little off for me, and I also just think I'm not a huge YA person, but it was fine. Milk Fed. Oh my god. I loved Milk Fed. If you love weird girl fiction, this is for you. Relationships with food, body, mothers, women, Judaism. It's just so weird and I love it. I think that's all I'm gonna say. Night Sky with Exit Wounds is a poetry collection by Ocean Vuong. I'm gonna say I love you most ardently. Ocean Vuong is probably the most talented poet living today. I adore his writing. Even the poetry that feels like it goes over my head and I struggle to understand, I can still find so much beauty in it. I'm very excited for his next novel, which comes out this year. Next, Whispers of the Deep, another mermaid fiction. Well, merman, I guess. This is a romance. Yeah, I would say You Were God and Waiting for You to Be Great. It takes place in a dystopian society where people live underwater in like submarine architectural structure communities. And these mermen are like the predators, and their, environment has been colonized by people. So they have tense relationships with them. And this girl, I don't know, gets captured by one of them. I just didn't like the science behind it. Like it just use fantasy elements. Just use fantasy elements. Don't try to explain to me how she can breathe and live underwater with like the immense pressure and cold. I just hate when science kills a good fantasy, Like either make it really profound science and like make it make sense, or just have it be fantasy. A magic seaweed plant that she can eat, that she can breathe underwater. I don't know. Next is Gay Girl Prayers. This is a poetry collection by Emily Austen. I love Catholic guilt. I'm gonna put this under You Were Good, I'm Waiting for You to Be Great. I am queer. I was raised in the church. I love religious poetry and using religion for metaphors and just unpacking that trauma. The poetry kind of fell flat for me. I know Emily Austen writes novels, and I've not read any of their novels, but I do know a lot of people love them. I don't know if they are a poet. I don't know what their experience with poetry is. I say this with love, but it kind of felt a little bit like Instagram, Tumblr poetry. There were times when they would get close to something really profound and kind of just back away from it. I do think they had some really successful poems in there though. There was one that was image and scene that was repeated throughout multiple poems that I really thought was strong. But overall it just kind of fell flat. Love the cover though. Next is Where the Light No Longer Follows. This is a novella, and I don't remember a lot about this, but I believe the premise is our main character is a reaper for the god of death. So she was immortal at one point, but now exists in this kind of limbo between living and death. She reaps souls for the god of death, and the god of death's brother, can't remember what he's the god of specifically, but he kind of starts coming into her life, and kind of they have like this playful banter, kind of enemies, not even enemies, but like she's just trying to do her job and he's bothering her, honestly, relationship. Basically, there's some kind of theme of like fated lovers, reincarnation vibes that was so good and so strong. I just wish it was a full-length novel. I wish there was more time to explain the world and the magic and how the system worked and their history, because I thought it was really strong and I liked the writing. But but because it was a novella and it was so short, I didn't really get a lot of the context of their relationship and how the magic really worked in this world, because super strong concept. I just wish it was a full-length novel so there was more time to explore backstory and world building. Next is Book Lovers. It was our book club's first book this year. I chose it because I figured everybody loves a good rom-com. I'm not a huge romance reader, even though there are a lot of romance books this year, but Emily Henry's just amazing. I didn't love as much as I love Beach Read. That'll forever be my fave, but it was a great novel. Loved it. Next, immediately, It'll Pass No, It Won't. Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. I've actually never read a James Baldwin novel before. I know who he is. I'm familiar with his story and his history and his work, but oh my god, this book. I felt it so deeply, and I adore his writing style. It was so beautiful. I cannot wait to read more, and the writing was truly beautiful. It was probably my favorite book of the year. Mother Thing. Back to some more weird girl lit. This is gonna go under I Love You Most Ardently. This book is genius. I had a weird girl lit summer, honestly, as you'll see with the next few reads. This is about a woman and her husband who are living in his mother's house. She just killed herself in the house, and he is being haunted by her ghost. And our main character is also being haunted by this ghost, but in a very different way. And she's trying to fill the space that his mother left. It's really messed up and I love it. Next is another poetry collection. This is Winter Recipes from the Collective by Louise Gluck. Her poetry is amazing. This wasn't my favorite collection of her poetry, but still so beautiful. More weird girl fiction. Bunny by Mona Awad. This is such a trip. I feel like I have to put it here. I was confused. I did not understand what was going on at all times. I think that's most people's experience with this book. I think I would benefit from a second read, but it was just so bizarre and just had so many elements that I love that I can't possibly put it any lower. I think if I read it again, it would move up to It'll Pass, but for now, I'll just plop it there. It's about a young woman. I think she's in grad school for writing, and there's this clique that I don't know if she calls them the bunnies, but I call them the bunnies in my mind. And she kind of gets roped into this group of women. Lots of trippy experiences, body horror, drugs, exploding boys and bunnies. It's so bizarre. It's so good though. You just have to read it. I can't tell you any more than that. Next, I read The 100 Years War on Palestine. It's hard to put in here because it is nonfiction. I think it's the only nonfiction on this list. I think I would put it here just because you have to have a lot of context going into it. This is certainly not a beginner's introduction to history of Palestine. It has a lot of first-person experiences and goes into a lot of detail with politics and people's names. And if you don't have a broader context or just general knowledge of the history of Palestine, you're gonna kind of find this hard to follow. I luckily did have that context already. I benefited a lot from this book. Next is The Final Girl Support Group, which is another book my book club read this year. I'm tempted to put it here. I'm tempted to put it here because I did not enjoy this book at all. But the premise was good, so it could go here. But I'm gonna put it here. The main character, so unlikable. No redeeming qualities whatsoever. I love an unlikable narrator. I did not like this unlikable narrator. She's not unlikable in a fun way. She's unlikable in a boring way. I think if you gave this concept to a woman and asked her to write this story, it would be completely different. I am not opposed to men writing women's stories. I think that there are plenty of amazing novels and films written about women by men. This is not one of those. Another mermaid duology. Ship of Bones and Teeth. I'm gonna be so real. I don't remember which is which. Oh, wait, okay, I know. The ship, it's kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean where they have that like, undead ship. This is like they're all vampires. So this one was okay. It was a little bit too much dark romance for me. This one is the sequel. It follows the mermaid from the first one's sister. And this is why I started this series, because this book here was pitched to me as from that one Pirates of the Caribbean movie where Sam Claflin plays a priest and he saves that mermaid. And they kind of have like a beautiful little forced proximity relationship. That's what this was pitched to me as, and that's not what it was. This was a lot of dark romance, actually, which I didn't love. I don't know, it just didn't really make sense. I honestly probably should have DNF'd it, but I will say, oh, I'll put it there. Next, another mermaid. This is literary fiction, weird girl, lit fic, body horror. I'm gonna put it up here. So Chlorine is about a young Asian American. She believes she is the world's first freshwater mermaid. I'll just leave it at that. You should definitely read that one though, it's so good. As long as you're fine with body horror, please proceed. Similarly to the Touch of Darkness series, this is a series I started reading a long time ago. The final book came out, Gone with the Wolf Knight. I don't want to say I'll never get that time back because there are aspects of it I enjoyed. Yeah, I think if it's there, you were good, waiting for you to be great. I really loved the other Married to Magic books in the series. This one just kind of felt flat. The romance dynamics weren't there. The plot twist was super predictable. It also felt like it kind of moved too fast, honestly, but it was really long, so that doesn't really make sense to me. Next is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. This one I liked a lot. I'm gonna put this under I Love You Most Ardently. It's like rivals slash enemies to lovers workplace. I thought it was really clever. I really loved both of the main characters. Enough said. Next, The Three Body Problem, also for my book club. I'm not a huge sci-fi person. I thought the premise was really cool, but it was so numbers and science and math heavy that like it went over my head for a lot of it. There's no doubt that it is a masterpiece in science fiction. It just wasn't for me. Next, A Lady for a Duke. This is a Regency romance, but the main character is a trans woman. It is so good. Such a beautiful depiction of trans people in historical fiction. Like if you like Bridgerton and you're not a TERF, would 100% recommend this book. I Love You Most Ardently. I think about it often. It's just so wholesome, but also so real. Basically the premise is our two main characters were in a battle, and our main character is shot and she is presumed to be dead. She takes that to her advantage and escapes and transitions to live her life as a woman. She was always really close to her best friend, who she also went to war with, and they are reunited many years later, and he is clearly not in a great state. He's been injured in war, so he's, you know, walking with a limp, and he's an alcoholic essentially and misses his best friend. It's almost like a second chance romance, except that they weren't ever together, but it's kind of like they learn about each other and fall in love again because he doesn't recognize her at first. It's just so beautiful. You have to read it. Next is Eileen by Otessa Moshfegh. You Are a Wonderful Experience. Not my favorite Otessa book, but still it's an Otessa book, so it's great. Her writing's phenomenal. All of her premises for her books are crazy. I love them. That's all I really have to say. Woman Eating. Ugh. This one's hard because I'm so tempted to put it in You Are Good, but I'm waiting for it to be great because I had very high expectations for this novel and they just weren't met, but also it was still a great novel. Like, I don't think it deserves to be next to these books. I'm gonna put it here. I think it was just the writing style I honestly didn't really like, but I do love the premise. It's a biracial vampire living in London. Her father was human, her mother's a vampire, so she's kind of navigating this world of identifying as human and wanting to fit in as human, but also needing to drink blood. It deals a lot with her complicated relationship with her mother, and trying to fit in these two different worlds. I don't think the writing style was for me, but was a very good book. Next, Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang, immediately up to the top. This book is crazy good. I love R.F. Kuang. I'm convinced there's no genre she can't write. This follows a white author who is best friends with an Asian author who meets an untimely end within like the first 2 chapters, and main character June chooses to steal her manuscript. Kind of just devolves into the story of how she she changes her author pen name to June Song because it sounds more Asian, and she feels like she's being haunted by the ghost of her friend. Next is Tenderly I Am Devoured. This is an arc that seemed right up my alley. I'm gonna leave it here. It reminds me a lot of Ava Reed's writing. It's very atmospheric, a mix between like historical fiction, fantasy, and folklore. It's about this girl who essentially is destined to be sacrificed to this swan god, and how she tries to prevent that from happening. There's just a love triangle that I don't love in this. I also don't love that it's YA. That's on me. It was clearly marketed as YA. It has a lot of great gothic elements to it, a lot of beautiful purple prose, which I love. The next book my book club read, The Female of the Species. I'm gonna put this at Your Wonderful Experience. This book is crazy. I didn't really know what to expect going into it, but super poignant novel about a young girl whose sister is murdered. She lives in this tiny like Midwestern town and follows these 3 characters. One, the girl whose sister was murdered, a kind of like football jock guy, and then PK, who is the preacher's kid. It's a story about revenge and assault and these tiny towns where life seems to be very cyclical, where my parents grew up here and this is where they went in high school to sneak out, and then they got married and they still live here, and then they had kids and the kids are doing the exact same thing the parents did. Great example of good YA fiction that I love. Next, I Who Have Never Known Men. This was a great read. Super quick. I'm gonna put it here. I think about this book often. I started rewatching season 1 of The Handmaid's Tale in November. No reason. But I also started reading this book around that time. It's, a dystopian novel where there are these 34 women who live in a cage together in an underground bunker, and among them is one child, and they've lived in this bunker for 10 years, and they have no memory of how they got in this position. They can remember life before, they can remember going to the grocery store and going out on dates and living a normal life, but they cannot remember how this happened. It's dystopian, it's sci-fi, it's so good. Great book to read now, honestly, in this political climate. I think about it often. The writing is beautiful, 100% would recommend. Next is Carmilla. But Your Wonderful Experience. This is a quick read. I'm wanting to read it for a while because I am writing a vampire literary fiction novel, so I want to read as much vampire fiction as I can. This version was edited by Carmen Maria Machado, one of my favorite writers of all time, and she has some really insightful footnotes, which I think drastically improved my reading experience of this. If you do read Carmilla, highly recommend reading this version. All right, Us in Ruins. This is written by the same author as The Library of Shadows, and it is going to go in the same category. Premise, again, so fun. A student on an archaeological dig trip is looking for this hidden treasure and stumbles across this statue who turns into a boy who happens to be the boy whose notes that she has been reading to help find this treasure. So he was frozen in time in the 1920s or something like that, and she, in present day, comes across him and basically have to reluctantly work together to find this treasure that they're looking for. The main character kind of annoyed me a lot because she clearly did not know a lot or have a lot of love for archaeology, which as an art history major, there were some moments where I was like, oh, okay, that was kind of dumb thing to say. I get it works with her character because her whole thing is that like she doesn't know what she likes and she's constantly trying new hobbies and she's never good enough, so she quits, and then like blah blah blah. This is her newest endeavor. So I understand it in that regard, but I wish she would have like gone in a little bit more, like actually done some research. She's like, I'm gonna be really good at archaeology, so I'm gonna learn something, but she just seemingly doesn't. This reminds me, one of the problems I have with this author's writing is she can have this really beautiful purple prose one minute and then the next like make a Taylor Swift reference, which kind of takes me out of it. Some of the writing can come across as a little cringy. So yeah, there's that. I'll probably read her next book. I think she has really great ideas and premises, and overall the stories are good. I just wish the writing was a little bit better maybe, which will come with time, I'm sure. Next is Hardly Strangers. This was a great book. Like I said, I feel like I'm not a huge romance reader, but there's something about this year. I read a lot of romance, and Hardly Strangers is from 831 Stories, a new romance publishing house, and so good. It's just like the classic like one night encounter. The male love interest is Irish, which I'm in my Irish boy era, so that was perfect. But yeah, there's a lot of vulnerability in this book. It doesn't go the way you think it's gonna go in terms of like a one-night stand, so really appreciated that. Last but certainly not least, The God of the Woods. This is my last read. I think I'm gonna put it here. I'm not usually a mystery and thriller person, but I think because this was like literary fiction mixed with those elements, I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. The premise is there's this summer camp in the Adirondacks. Everyone wakes up one morning and there's a camper missing. Obviously this is bad news, but it's particularly bad because it is the daughter of the family that owns the camp, and also her older brother went missing when he was 10 at this camp like 10 years ago. So a lot of mystery, lots of characters, lots of time jumps, but it's written so immersively that it's really easy to follow. It's a little difficult in the beginning, but once you get into it, like, you know all the characters, you understand when there's a time jump who we're going back to. Really interesting class commentary and class dynamics, and a little bit of exploration of queerness as well. This takes place in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And very atmospheric. The Adirondacks as a place, it feels like a character in itself. Really strong writing, super interesting. I didn't see the ending coming necessarily, at least from the beginning, but it was really fun book. I loved it. So that is all of my 2024 reads ranked. Can you believe it? I honestly thought there would be more in these last two columns, but happy to see the majority of the reads fell in here. I'm excited for my reads in 2025, and yeah, thanks for watching.